All right. Oh, come on. Don't do that. Jesus Christ. Why do you have to do this? All right. All right. Yesterday, with the tumult in her eyes, she tried kissing me. And I don't know rightly why, but I'm about to be caught up in the storm. She bruised next to me. Hey guys. Everything. I'm setting up a new camera setup. No, I'm testing out a new camera setup. And now I have all these notifications just like blinging all over the place. And I think there might be a lag with my audio. So you guys let me know how I sound. Where were we? I keep my body warm in this double bed. That perhaps from too much drink I had let her in. And I can't allow her to think she's got the upper hand. Hey guys. I can't perform music in front of people. But I can perform thoughts in front of people. That's kind of like the way in which my brain travels. I get all like anxious and good. Checking out the audio and stuff. How's the video look? I'm gonna have to figure out how to get the green screen to go live, but waiting for the software to upgrade. It doesn't look like it's going to upgrade anytime soon, so I'm gonna have to redesign a bookshelf or something so it's not like me and a freaking green screen, because a green screen is probably the worst thing to look at. That's why a computer can just like very efficiently ignore a green screen. So I want to let everybody know that there will be a meetup in Olympia. And if you find me on Facebook, it's a picture of me in a stupid hat. Not as stupid as this one. Benjamin Boyce, I think, is my name on Facebook. DM me and I'll invite you to the group. It's going to be north of Olympia. You look green, y'all toilets be talking stuff. Take my shirt off. I'm not going to take my shirt off. I don't want to start paying the IRS for all the income that I'm generating from my sexualities. I like my sexualities to be absolutely free and libertarian. Or is it libertine? Libertine? I don't know. So this is just an open back and forth with you guys. So again, this is a new setup. Amazon totally screwed me with an adapter, so I have to connect to my laptop, which is way down here. So I have to look over here to see what you guys are saying instead of looking right into your faces. Somebody, one of my benefactors, anonymous, of course, they bought me this this thing where I can plug into my camera, and it's got like this this window mirror thing, and I can put an iPhone in there. But I don't know how to figure out how to get the Skype to go through an iPhone and then bing back to me what's going on the desktop. There might be a way for an iPhone to mirror a desktop, but it might not be possible. Actually, that would be really wonderful. I could get that to work with Skype so that when I do an interview, I can look directly at the person. But I kind of like, and this is totally geeky, nerdy, and we'll get into like any discussion. This is free roaming discussion, so you guys just tell me what you want to talk about. But the thing is about the Skype interviews, and I have two fabulous interviews coming up. One is processing right now, and the other one I'm going to have on Friday. I won't really tell you guys what it is about, but it does have to do with what I was talking about with Megan Murphy. Not her being banned, but some of the not the reaction, but other layers to the gender critical trans rights debate. And I'm trying to give a lot of breadth to these discussions on my channel. And I really want you to stop clicking, little thing, but you won't stop clicking. So I got more interviews with you guys. Maybe this is really frustrating. I know that there's a way to stop these sound effects. Oh, there we go. Okay. And then I'm going to turn off notifications. Do not disturb. There we go. So anyways, like I was saying, with an interview, I'm usually looking at the screen, and what that ends up doing in rendering the interview is that it kind of looks like I'm, like Brady Bunch style. I'm looking at the person. I think it might be a little disconcerting if I'm looking directly at the camera during an interview. I don't know. You guys tell me what freaks you out or doesn't freak you out with regards to YouTube eye contact. I like using YouTube eye contact in something like this or in my little short videos, but when I'm talking to somebody else, I feel like there's some sort of gravity that occurs with me looking directly into the camera that might end up distracting from the interviewer. So if I'm looking at the interviewee, even though I'm fakely looking at them, to you it looks like I'm looking at them. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let's hit these comments. You guys got any questions? This is free question and answer period. And I'm working on my laptop, so I don't have a lot of screen real estate to actually... I can't even stretch... Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, about the... what's it called? The meetup's going to be great. Bring your own beverage and snacks to share. It looks like I'm cutting out, so I'm using this totally technical until we get into something interesting. I'm using a Lumix GH4 that's on permanent loan from a friend of mine. And what happens is that it cuts the screen when it feeds through this little device that I got. I'm making a little bit of money off of Patreon, and then I put that little bit of money back into what I'm doing. So I got this Ultra Studio Mini recorder. Unfortunately, it's a Thunderbolt 3, and I need to get a Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2 adapter to go into my big machine. So anyways, it's running through my laptop, and I think that the sensor is cropped, so it looks like I'm not framed as much as I want it to be. So, ask any questions. Logical humanoid. Human. Oh, I mispronounced that. Logical humanoid human. I've been waiting to hear from a feminist what they think of trans women. Yeah, so I'm speaking to, I just spoke today with a UK, which is United Kingdom, trans woman. And she was a radical trans activist, and she saw herself in a documentary, and she had a reaction, and she started actually engaging with people in these debates. And I'm not going to spoil it, but she had a transition of heart with regards to how to communicate the trans rights agenda to people who don't know about it, right? So look at that. This is from Goodwill. I'm just going to have a flopper. So, I would like to talk more with a feminist or a gender critical feminist about trans rights. Maybe as me and Megan Murphy interact more, we'll get deeper. I've been taking the long route with speaking to Megan Murphy and introducing her to my channel. I've done a lot of anti-feminist work on my channel, and that definitely turns off feminists, especially, radical feminists. And I was hoping to establish a rapport with Megan, unfortunately, but not unfortunately, because Megan's got the stomach of a goddess. A lot of, hate has come down. Well, not hate. I'm sorry. That's an overused term, but a lot of negativity, or a lot of criticism has happened in the comments of my discussions with Megan Murphy, whether deserved or not. That actually, those negative comments, or the amount of negativity towards feminism, actually, I think, might squash actual communication between feminists who come to the channel to check out Megan, and to voice her side of the argument. So I'm hoping that over time we would start to present an accessible format for people who are feminists and people who are not feminists, who are feminism curious or who are, anti-feminism to start to have like actual extended dialogues. I don't know if that's necessarily possible in the YouTube comment sphere, but I've seen a lot of awesome things happening in my personal YouTube comments. So anyways, so I'm taking the long tact with Meghan Murphy and establishing a rapport with her, establishing a friendship with her, and then doing a longer, kind of dialogue with her that goes back and forth. I think that's one of the things that the internet is lacking. Long form, personal, back and forth. To use an analogy, so there was these things called movies, and there was this thing called TV, right? And TV was kind of like the cheap stuff, and the movies were the excellent stuff, right? And then what happened, something amazing happened, and I think it happened before The Sopranos, but around the time of like the early aughts, The Sopranos came around and Lost came around, and what The Sopranos and Lost proved was that people have the ability to pay attention to a deep story that that advances over time. And, with The Sopranos, it was almost like a novel, like the quality of a novel started to be, implemented into the television sphere. And now what we have now is that a lot of the movie actors who would, a generation ago would never go into TV because that shows that they're no longer an A-lister. A lot of A-listers are now going into TV because it gives them a lot of room to actually express themselves and to explore a character. And I think that if we work kind of hard and display a little bit of patience within the YouTube discussion sphere, we can actually give room for people to actually investigate, to express at length their opinion, and then to actually investigate their opinion and find new and novel things. And the wonderful thing about the Meghan Murphy interview, at least as far as I was concerned, was that she expressed boredom with her echo chamber. And we kind of did a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis about what happens when somebody who's in a radical echo chamber starts to leave that echo chamber. And I saw a little bit of this on Reddit where people started to accuse Meghan Murphy of selling out or of, betraying the gender critical sphere because she's actually having dialogue and she's open to the ideas of people who were against her or who disagree with her or who just don't even understand. But she expressed, I think, amazing amounts of courage to what, I'm bored of this stuff. And actually, it's backfiring now. I don't want to put words into her mouth or thoughts into her head, but the whole feminism thing on Twitter is receiving a lot of backlash because somehow the radical trans rights activists have gotten in control of Twitter and are now banning people for saying very mundane things like a man is a man and not a woman. So, anyways, let's go back to this chat field. Oh, here we go. I wish I could just edit out that bad word in your name, but I think you ask wonderful questions, Dr. Toilet. Do I think the progressive stack is an attempt to explore individuality while simultaneously conflicting with the ideological aspects of group identity? The progressive stack, as far as I understand it, is that everybody is assigned a certain amount of privilege points. And I don't think I came up with that idea, but I was making fun of that idea a year ago, and PSA Snitch made a very fabulous episode about progressive math. You should watch that on his channel, PSA Sitch. There's an underscore there. I don't know why, but there is. But what happens in a progressive stack, as far as I understand it, is that everybody is assigned their privilege points. And the more privilege you have, the less power you have. And the more oppression you have, the more power you have. And so what happens is that there's this hierarchy that's formed with the person with the most intersecting oppressions gets to control the conversation. But that's not true. Because if you want to actually control the conversation or control the group, you still need to have the most privilege of all, which is the ability to connect with the hearts and the minds of men. And I'm using men in the very old form where it just meant humans. You actually have to have charisma to actually affect the stack if you end up with all the cards. So it's not actually it's not actually an inversion of privilege. It is on the surface, but the people with the most privilege, the most communicable privilege, end up getting that. So to go back to your question, do I think that the progressive stack is an attempt to explore individuality? Which is interesting because I think Jonathan Peugeot and Jordan Peterson about a year ago had this really fascinating discussion about, how many identity categories do you need before it becomes essentially infinite? And they did some sort of math, or maybe Jordan just did the math, that was like 7 identity categories makes you like actually an individual. So with me, I'm 42, I'm white male, I'm cis, I'm bearded, I wear funny hats, I'm poor, and whatever, right? Eventually you get so close to only one person has these amount of traits that you basically have an individuality. So I think maybe perhaps that progressivism or privilegeism or breaking people down into categories and intersectionality is a way to try to get to the individual, but it does it through such a mathematically complex, convoluted means that it actually obscures what it is to be an individual. And I think that the wonderful thing about my heritage, I'm not saying that it's the most privileged heritage, but the wonderful thing about my heritage is that instead of going from the outside in, it goes from the inside out and starts to form a character out of principles and out of virtues and basically out of character traits. So, if we go back into the Mahabharata, which is the Indian epic, which is basically, it's a very complex story in which the Indian, I don't know, it's escaping me, but a lot of religious truths are conveyed within this narrative framework. But if you take that narrative framework and you perform it on a stage, right, in Indonesia they have these wayang plays, and I'm mispronouncing that, but they have these shadow plays which do versions of the Mahabharata. And what you have is all these different characters that are cutouts, and then a light shines on them and you see them blown up and they're doing their things. And what you can do is you can see that these different characters, they have all these different, visual traits that translate into character traits. So when you look at him on the screen, a character in that who is ugly will actually have ugly character traits. And somebody who is beautiful, represented on the stage, has virtuous traits. And I'm sure that there's some swapping once you get into more complex versions of the story. You have somebody who looks beautiful, but who doesn't act beautiful, and somebody who is ugly, but acts beautiful too. What I'm trying to say is that there are ways of conveying character traits that are much more closely linked and actually digestible and then implementable by an individual than these outer categories, than these categories of oppression. Going through the sociological categories of oppression, you're never going to get to an actual individual, because basically, in so far as I understand what intersectionality does, or that whole quadrant of thinking, is that it has this thing where the agency is outside of the individual. We are shaped entirely by society, and so we need to change society in order for somebody to live a good life as an individual. But I don't think you can actually do that. I think I said on Twitter once that in order for us to give a decent living to every individual in our country, we don't just give them money, we don't just give them resources, we teach them how to live a decent life as a decent individual. Because if somebody isn't a decent individual, their decent living might seem decent on paper, but will be used towards indecent means. So, maybe, to get back to your question, do I think that the progressive stack is an attempt to explore individuality while simultaneously conflicting with the ideological aspects of group identity? Maybe I covered that. I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I just rambled. I'm going to take a drink of beer, and then I'm going to scroll through these lovely comments. How you guys doing? This is just an open question and answer period. If you popped in, as about 40 of you have since I started rambling. I got a new setup. I'm sorry about the green screen. I need to do some designing in my thing. Look, I have this raincoat that actually is green. So now I'm going to be able to erase that black board that goes back and forth behind me. Back and forth behind me. Like I was saying I was going to drink. Guide me, D'Anthony Morgan. The thing is about these comments is that I ramble and I come back and I have no idea what you guys are talking. Are you talking to me? You want me to guide you? It'll take 2 pennies and I will ford for you the river of fire into my domain where Persephone and Hades sit upon a throne while all the ghostly ghouls navigate the underworld around them. But you're probably not talking to me because I can't guide anybody. I'm not a guide. Well, I am a driver. So in a way, I'm guiding children back home. Say, filthy heterodox. I am a heterodox. I'm not going to toot my own horn. I'm going to take that off. I don't want to toot my own horn. I felt really good about myself for having all these dialogues with people of different identities from me. I really enjoy actually talking to people who are different from me, talking to women, talking to feminists, talking to people of different races, talking to people of different experiences. I don't necessarily, I mean, I guess it's kind of fun to talk to people who are kind of in my neck of the woods, but I'm just like, well, what is there really to talk about? Either you have something different from me that I can learn from, or you have something the same as me that I can agree with. So I guess the thing about being a heterodox is that you want me to dance. I'm not going to dance. Dance. I guess the thing about being heterodox and surrounding yourself with heterodoxic people is that hopefully somebody has a different idea than you, and then you get to like, oh, wow, look, a different idea. Wow, cool, a different idea. I mean, that's the thing I'm hoping that happens with these whole echo chambers, is that people just get bored as hell. They're like, wait, everybody's just saying the same thing and thinking the same way. This is boring. I mean, it's comforting. It's comforting up to a point. And I don't want to spoil the interview, but it seems like a lot of the radicalism that is expressed, and that is ogled at on YouTube is from people who are outcasts. Either they don't have a place in the world, or the world has shown itself, whether fictitiously or actually, as to be against them. Then these people, they band together and they get into this group think where like the world is against us, and that us being against is very strong. It's very wonderful. It's very tempting. And actually, it's probably necessary at a certain stage of development. I think that the wonderful thing about sports is that we've gamified that kind of tribalism. So the tribalism gets to act out in a way that's not destructive. That doesn't really mean anything in reality. It just means something in a game. So I think that sports are probably something that every kid needs to go through, and then kids will probably peter out. But anyways, what we do is, I think a lot of aspects of our being is really activated through contest, through trying to one up the other team or trying to one up the other person on your team, right? Like John Lennon and Paul McCartney. I'm going to make a better song than him. I'm going to make a better song than him. Or like the Beach Boys versus the Beatles. I'm going to make a better album than them. I'm going to make a better album than them, or and it goes on and on and on. So I think that if we can direct that contestedness in a creative manner, then it actually provides us fruit. But when it's not directed in a creative manner, when it's directed wholly through, it's not my person who's going to speak with me. When we direct it in a negative way, it actually has very drastic negative consequences. Not only the people who are radically throwing Molotov cocktails through businesses, not only the businesses, but also society in general starts to get really anxious and starts to feel under threat. And then you have these stupid tribes of people saying, I'm black, and people saying, I'm white, right? And those things mean something to us because of history or whatever, and then people don't actually go beyond that identity. And plus they police themselves within that identity. And I'm getting off topic, but we don't have a topic, do we? Okay. I was thinking today, I was invited to do a. Somebody wanted to have a conversation with me, like another YouTuber. I'm sorry if you see this. I'm going to try to strip your identity from you, but they really wanted me on their channel. They wanted to be on my channel, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And I started looking through their stuff, and they seemed to be like very like against people in the third world or against people of a certain race. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe in a certain context, I would want to speak to an actual racist, but I kind of despise racism. I kind of like despise people who are racist. And when I talk about racism and when I talk about anti-racism, I don't talk from a position of despising somebody who has racism, because I don't think that's actually helpful. Like, I just want to admit to you that I think that racism is despicable, but I also think that it's just part of development, that it's a stage of development that people just need to understand that, like, okay, I need to grow beyond that. I need to grow beyond my DNA, right? And some people aren't ready to do that or aren't there. But at the same time, some people are they really like being racist, and they like stirring up racist shit. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the people who want to activate racism in other people. That's where I start to like dislike the racist. If you're like just a racist, but you know, you're not like trying to incite racism, you're not a violent person, I'm like, okay, well, let's talk it through, because it's really an efficient way of categorizing the world, right? But if somebody's like, you know what, all these people from this certain color, you know, they're coming into our countries and da 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 da, I'm like, no, I don't want to be associated with you. I really don't. Because if you're actively inciting that stuff, there's nothing that I can do to change you. There's only stuff that I could do to reinforce you. Maybe I had a sense that I can only reinforce that, and I don't want to reinforce that. I don't know how I got onto that. My social justice credit score. How does that's the thing. We need to go, like, what's your credit score? What's your your social justice cred? Like, look at all the people from all these marginalized identities that I've spoken to. Like, I'm doing really good. I really don't like that people don't see my hat. My lady got this at Goodwill. I think it's a fox. Yeah, it's a fox. It's definitely a fox. Social justice credit score, yeah. Oh, wait, do I think... is this for me, Raymond? I think... What does that mean? I mean, if I said no, that's pretty damn racist, isn't it? Like, everybody can be this way. Every human being in existence has come through a very long lineage of working up through a little single cell all the way up into a simian, and then through the tribal structure. Like, eventually we got into this form that we're in. I don't necessarily think that humanity itself comes from the single cell organism. I think that I agree with Ken Wilber, who talks about a process of involution that preceded evolution. So there was this... I don't want to get into this stuff. I'm going to mangle it, and two, I'll get embarrassing into theology. But I do think in a certain respect that essence precedes existence, but existence is the process of implementing essence, of proving what essence is. So, yeah, I think we all came from a place where what we call racism now is a very necessary thing to have, to understand how to survive. Anyways, but we don't need to be that way anymore. But maybe I'm being racist for being colorblind. Oh, okay. Should I tell this story or not? Michael Brumlew says, what I have found is most people actually dislike culture, not the race. Do you have any thoughts on disliking a mutable feature such as culture versus race? That's a good question, because is culture mutable? That's the question, right? Like, how deep is my culture ingrained into me? How lucky, how privileged am I to have a dad who was very strongly Christian, who implemented certain virtues into me, right? Such as humility. which I had a hard time still wrestling with that, but like humility is still a virtue. I need to strive towards that, such as like being attentive, such as being wary of the world, being wary of my own desires, right? Like that culture is so deeply embedded into my consciousness that a lot of the conscious algorithms that I produce as a conscious being are actually workings out, whether for or against that cultural algorithm. So I don't know how mutable that is. I think that what's trying to happen is that you have a lot of people in the academy trying to redesign, resculpt, and not just in the academy, but everybody who's involved in a lot of these like institutions of media. They're trying to mutate culture because they think that it's mutable, but I don't think they fully understand where culture comes from. So that's why I think that Brett Weinstein and a lot of the people in evolutionary psychology, they're trying to point us towards things that will help us actually modify society that in a way that harmonizes with our lower instincts, with our selfish desires, but that lifts them up by taking them into account, not by denying them, but by taking them into account, being wary of them, and then producing something, channeling them, like I was saying with contest, channeling them towards a productive process. So, what was your question? Do I have any thoughts on disliking a mutable feature such as culture and versus race? Actually, yeah, I do think that actually racially, race itself doesn't really matter. It's actually the culture that we are reacting negatively against. And I think that in a sense, our culture is reacting negatively to the alien culture that we come across. It's not like I'm necessarily reacting negatively as an individual to this individual expressing these cultural traits, but there's something that doesn't jive in our cultures, right? There's some sort of thing that doesn't work between our cultures. So, I'm going to strip the race out of this. But a couple days ago, I pulled up to work. Okay. I drive a vehicle. I pulled into the parking lot, and I have to park this vehicle in a very specific place because this vehicle is built to serve people who have mobility problems, right? So I have a spot that I drive this vehicle up, and I need to be in that spot so the people that I drive can get on the bus. Oh, shoot. The vehicle. And there is somebody in a big blazer there. They're just right in my spot. So I pull up and I honk. And I honk again, and they move 6 inches, and I honk again, they move 6 inches, and I honk again, and they don't move. So I get out, and I'm outside, it's raining, I'm outside of their vehicle, I'm like, hey, and they're totally ignoring me. They're like looking at their phone. They know that I'm there, and I'm like, hey. So I tap on the windshield. I'm like, knock, knock, knock on the windshield. And she rolls down the windshield. She's like, don't ever touch my car. Say, excuse me. I'm like, well, I was trying to get your attention, but like, I need to be here. I need to get the kids on. I need to get the vehicle transport entities into my vehicle transport machine, and I need to do that right here. And, I dumbed it down for this person. But they're like, whatever, fine. They roll up the window and they move another 6 inches. I get back in the bus and like, they move 6 inches. I keep on honking, and anyways, they were totally rude. And I had this moment, I'm like, wow, this is a stereotypical person from this kind of culture, and they are completely rude, completely empowered, whatever, just does not jive with the way that this culture works, does not jive with this system. Not endowed. What's that word when you think that you're special and that everybody should cater to you? Anyways, they were that kind of person. And I had a moment where I'm like, well, I have these feelings towards this person, and if I express these feelings in the wrong way, this would be pretty damn racist of me to think this way. But I'm not going to think this way, but like there's a culture clash here, right? But that person is not indicative of the entire race. It's indicative of a particular culture, a particular group. And in that interaction, I could see that, like, if I did the wrong thing, I could get in trouble for being racist because they have the card, right? But at the same time, that person is not acting according to how the system operates. And how do you get a culture to understand that, like, if they want the benefits of the greater culture, they need to fit into the mechanism of the culture. And the thing is about Evergreen, they're empowering these people from, inner city culture to think that they never have to adapt to the wider culture. The wider culture needs to have competency for their needs, right? So they're actually they're trying to seed these people with, what's that word? Not empowerment, but entitlement, right? They're trying to say that you can be as entitled as you want because of historical reasons. Everybody has to bend to your will. But actually, if everybody acted that way, the system itself wouldn't function. And the system itself is not whiteness, it's not supremacy, it's efficiency, right? It's a deeper value. And I think that a lot of the things that I just said could be taken out of context, but I think I've been trying to iterate these things over and over and over again, so I don't seem like an alt-right troll. I'm not alt-right. I actually try to talk to people from a variety of cultures, but still, there's a certain narrative where certain people get all the power because they lacked the power in the past. I think culture is mutable, but you have to go through, there needs to be some sort of translation between culture, but if certain values don't match up, then that's going to cause a lot of strife. There's certain values that they can't bend. You can translate up to a point. You can translate one culture into another culture up to a point, but there's certain values of working together, of cooperation, of understanding, I don't belong here, I belong over there, that you can't really translate. It's like, this is the rule. If you can't understand this rule, then you cannot operate within this system. So I think that's on the onus of the person to kind of change their behavior. I don't know. Let's get off this topic. And Danton Morgan, you like something I said. This is the thing about these live streams. Peterson says this, if you can't be stupid, then you can't be smart. If you don't have the freedom to make an ass of yourself, then you don't have the freedom to actually own any, accidentally brilliant thing that you say. So with the whole live stream thing, it's like, okay, I'm going to walk this tightrope. And I might fall off, but I'm just throwing my words over this tightrope, and they might fall off. And I might embarrass myself by singing stupidly. I might embarrass myself by painting myself into a corner. I might embarrass myself by, messing up my word verbiage like I do so often until I get on a roll. But anyways, go Ben, go! Loyal opposition, I hope you can make it up to our meetup. We're having a meetup. Moderate meetup, Centrist Salon on Saturday. Find me on Facebook. I'll hook you up with the event. I will also post it in that weird, paste board on YouTube. But I can't really post the address there. I might post the address the day of, but if you guys are in the Lacey, Olympia, or South Tacoma area, or if you just want to hike down from Seattle, hike up from Portland, BYOB and snacks. Saturday evening, starting at 6. My friends will be there. Do I think all people have the same capacity to use reason, to evaluate, improve themselves? I think that reason, everybody has the capacity to be taught reason. Not everybody has the processing power to process reason to a certain degree. That's why I think that we will never be able to escape needing a narrative framework. You can just call it a religion. We need a religion for the masses. It's not the opiate of the masses. Religion isn't the opiate of the masses. It's the motor oil of society. That's what it is. It allows for the finer parts to interact with the grosser parts. It allows people with a lower processing power to interact with people of a higher processing power. Now, being of a lower processing power isn't all negative, because the people with the lower processing power don't get bored doing repetitive tasks, and the world is still built of repetitive tasks. And I think I might be venturing into singularity territory where all this automation takes over, but there's still going to be a place for people to do repetitive tasks, even if that repetitive task is playing a video game or interacting on social media in a repetitive manner. Now, if we have a narrative framework, then there's a way for the very fine people, the people with higher processing power, to interact with people of a lower processing power without necessarily denigrating them, but still preserving to a certain degree a resolution of fineness as it translates into a grosser form of interaction, of conceiving the world. And I talked about this in my last live stream about what is narrative. Narrative is a replication of of experience, where there's a character, a situation, a plot, and an environment, and then different characters with different virtues, different strengths and weaknesses all interact with each other, and you can derive a whole bunch of different meanings out of a narrative. You can derive a moral meaning, you can derive an imaginative meaning, you can derive a critical theory meaning, or you can derive an emotional meaning. You can get a sense of the harmony of human behavior through a story that can then be translated into a bunch of different critiques, right? But that the first critique of a narrative is the experience of a narrative. And through narrative, through a religious narrative or whatever, we can communicate certain patterns of behavior that will help society run in a better, smoother fashion, which will evoke or instill in people the desire to act in certain ways and to avoid acting in other ways. Now, it's not going to be perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect, because certain people are just evil as all get up. That's the thing. But I think through narrative, you can actually teach people how to recognize certain characteristics of people you can trust and people you can't trust, even if that person that you can't trust is dressed up as somebody that you can trust, right? That can be communicated through narrative much more efficiently, I think, for all rungs of development, whether, if you're a 20-year-old and you still think like a 12-year-old, if you're a 20-year-old, still think like a 12-year-old, or if you're a 40-year-old who thinks like a hyper-year-old, or whoever's really intelligent, right? A narrative has the capacity to stack all these different understandings and to unify people in the first critique of a narrative, which is the experience of a narrative, which then translates into a feeling or a sense of how behavior operates in the world and how different characters with different behaviors interact with each other through the world. So, again, man, you know what? I go into these live streams thinking I have nothing to say, but then you guys start listening to me, and then my brain's like, oh, I'm being listened to. Do I think all people have the same capacity to use reason to evaluate and improve themselves? I did want to say one more thing. I'm going to get in trouble with this. I dislike atheism. I dislike new atheism. I dislike people who think that everything can be communicated through reason, because they end up feeling that they're superior than people who can't use those tools, right? I think that atheism has a tendency to boost people's thoughts of themselves so that they can look down on other people. And hopefully not all atheists are like that. I'm not saying all atheists are like that, but with a narrative framework, I think that you can avoid that, because you can understand that there's different levels of understanding through a narrative, whereas reason itself doesn't cover all experience. It's narrow. It's a processing. It's an after processing. It's a consideration after the experience. Not everybody can get through to that other side of experience. Just try to read one of my books, and you'll understand that. What the fuck is he talking about? This is supposed to be a story. I feel that there's a story in here, but there's all this stuff in the way of the story. So I think that atheism needs to reform itself in such a way. I think a lot of things, if they could actually create a dramatic narrative of themselves, then, they would actually have substance in the human sphere. But the human sphere is not built out of reason. The human sphere is built out of narrative. And disagree with me. This is just my opinion. You know what? I don't have to do a disclaimer because it's my fucking channel, right? Yeah. You know what? Come to this gathering and tell me how I'm wrong. I'll just listen to you. I'll just listen. Louis, the Roman numerals. In 1499, Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci landed at today's nation of Venezuela. He was first to discover the mainland continent, thus the Americas were named. How is an Indian a Native American? I think we call them indigenous peoples or first peoples now. You ask Wikipedia grade questions, you get Wikipedia grade answers. Actually, that was not Wikipedia grade at all. I have no idea what this is, but there's a lull. I'm going to drink a beer and then we'll go through. Content warning has a quote. You guys are having a conversation. I have no idea. Here's the conversation that I'm not a part of because I'm having a conversation with people who are listening, not with people who are typing. Content warning. This one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors. Did this come up because I said Indian, Native Americans? Did I say that? I can't remember. Speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government. Very similar in their manners and customs. This one connected country, I'm sorry, I'm coming in the middle of this. I have no idea. Somebody asked me a question. This one connected country. Okay, this is the question. This is really a question about multiculturalism. Can we live in a multicultural society? I think we can. I really do. I think we can. I think we just need some sort of narrative oil that can get all these different operations to work together. And what is that? That's the true postmodern project, is to come up with a lubricant that can interact without degrading or actually preserving the interaction between different cultures. Now, with the whole cultural appropriation baloney, that's not going to help. Well, you're over there, I'm over here, but what am I? I'm just this other thing. I don't know anymore because there's so many generations going through this melting pot that you cannot recover your indigenous culture at this point unless you're actually a first generation person from that culture. But everybody else is so far beyond that what is our culture now? What is authenticity? Authenticity is not found anymore in your culture. Your authenticity is found in the resonance between your expressions of your individuality and the other person resonating with your individuality. It's not just about you saying, this is how I feel to be, this is how I want to be. That's part of the equation. That's a necessary part of the equation. But that equation, culture, is a loop. Culture is a circuit. You don't just have a bunch of individuals assembling culture. You have people sharing culture, you have people expressing culture, and then finding other people that resonate with them. Now, the cool thing about thinking, the cool thing about being heterodox, the cool thing about being read or being interested in ideas is that is a language where you can almost bypass the grosser forms of culture, and I mean that as the denser forms, not lower in any means, but that allows for a translation of the individual into thought that kind of bypasses in a lot of ways certain cultural artifacts, right? But then can still resonate with that emotional level of culture and express that, but actually you're having a dialogue with somebody on another sphere. So that's the cool thing about being interested in ideas, is that you can kind of say, okay, well, these are all these objects. Culture is just a bunch of objects, but what are you doing with those objects, and how does these objects make sense? And then you can actually start interacting with people on that level. But if everything just comes down to these cultural, I have half of an idea, and I ran out into the other half of the idea. I didn't have another half an idea when I started talking about that. But I think that it all comes down into community. It all comes down into not just the expression of culture. Authenticity is found in that circuit of somebody recognizing you as being you, situated within this culture, all these cultural effects, right? Assembling the cultural effects is an expression of yourself, but that expression of itself needs to land on another person. There needs to be dialogue. That's how we are formed. That's how culture's formed, through communication, not just through your self-expression. And that's one thing that a lot of young artistic men, need to get through their heads. And like me, sometimes it takes way too long. I need to look at the time because I think it's time to cook dinner. I'll give us 5 more minutes, and then I have to go cook some rice because we're having Korean food. That's not cultural appropriation. That's just usage of taste buds and my wonderful woman's ability to translate an idea into a palatable substance. Okay, here. Sanded bacon. Cultural appropriation is a great thing. My family replaced a lot of bad ideas with better ones when we left Mexico. That would be a wonderful conversation to have, like that. Like, how are we able to let go of certain aspects of our culture that don't work anymore, but still retain the parts of our culture that give, that link us to the past, that link us to our particular history, to our ancestors. I don't think any culture should be erased, But I think every culture should be upgraded. Every culture should be constantly upgraded, but maybe there are some cultures that just can't be upgraded, or it's initial, or it's inherent in their culture that they never upgrade. But like people like Orthodox Jews and the Amish, like they pick and choose what to upgrade and what not to upgrade, you know. So there's certain cultures that demark themselves as, you know, inherently non-upgraded. That's like one of the hallmarks of their culture, is that they don't upgrade. But it's an interesting question. That's a more interesting discussion. That's the problem with this whole moralistic progressive framework, is that it just squashes everything interesting about how do you translate yourself. Like, it glosses over all the interesting aspects of being a human by reducing them into shoulds and should nots, do's and do nots, thou shalts and thou shan'ts, right? And then it gives a bunch of people power to, you know, implement their version of society. And then other people are like, well, I guess I want to belong, so I'm just going to go along with that. Super chat from a cat. Do I think that the anti-science aspect of the left can be defeated? Or will they just continue to regress? You know what? I really think that the left isn't the left. The regressives are not the left. I think there is a huge discussion. Maybe here's how it is. I don't like these over my ears. It's getting sweaty. Brett Weinstein's left, right? There's a lot of scientists on the left. It's just who has control over the perception of the left. Well, there's a lot of people who are anti-left who have control over the perception of the left. And there's a lot of people who are left who are doing a lot of damage to the left. By commandeering the definition of being left. So, science doesn't matter. Science doesn't care about your politics. Science doesn't care about anything. Science will create a superweed that will demolish all of humanity. It doesn't care. It just wants to know, and then play with that knowing. That's all science does. And yeah, I know, that's not science. I always say what science is, and people ruin me, because I don't really know what science is. But I don't think that science is necessarily penned to the right or the left, right? There's a lot of people on the right who don't like science. I mean, pick and choose which science is most inconvenient for any political thing, and then you'll see people being anti-science as soon as it goes against their political sphere. So, I don't think that, I think that the anti-science aspect of the left, it doesn't even need to be defeated. It just needs to be shown to be a dead end. I mean, I guess it's going to defeat itself. And a lot of people with leftist progressive ideals will say, okay, well, that was a bad idea. Glad they're gone. Glad they made such a fool of themselves that they're not in control of Twitter anymore, or YouTube, or wherever, in control of the sculpting of the body of discourse, right? So I think that the question is, how do we get the anti-science, and whatever that means, how do we get the attitude of anti-science out of any given person? That's the question. Like, that's the fruitful line of inquiry. Like, how do you stir up people's ability to question themselves, to rely on empirical evidence, to be humble in the face of not knowing, to be comfortable with not knowing, and actually seeing not knowing as an opportunity? Because if you don't see not knowing as an opportunity, you're going to absolutely act ignorantly, because you're not going to be able to say, oh, I don't know. You just like, oh, well, I could never not know. So you just act out of not knowing, which is ignorance, right? So how do we foster non-ignorant activities and attitudes in other people? I think we foster creativity. We foster the insight that, oh, it's much more interesting to learn than it is to know. And knowing is only the ground for a better understanding of what we don't know, right? Like, everything needs to be truly progressive in the sense of like, okay, what's next? What's next? What's the better story? What's the better activity? How can we reduce our carbon footprint and not moralize it? Just say, okay, I don't need so many cans of frickin' beer. I'm going to go and invest in a little refrigerator and a keg with a tube, and then I'll only go through these things that I can recycle instead of going through like too many of these things. I feel bad. Like, this is my progressivism. Like, why do I keep on using these things? I use them once and then I throw them away. And yeah, sure, they get recycled, but how much energy goes into this thing that I could reduce that energy? I don't need to use so much energy. I can be more frugal. Frugality is not a virtue that is belong to the left or the right. It's just expressed differently by the left and the right. So I think certain virtues can be transcendent to the left and right divide or the disagreement. If we can come to like basic fundamental principles, encode them in a way that can be translated or communicated across culture, across different layers of culture, through, I think, a narrative, through a series of narratives, through TV shows and video games and all this stuff, promulgate these, certain fundamental aspects, which will allow more people to live better as we go through time, which I think is kind of like a left-ish position. But actually, the right thinks that too. Everybody wants everybody to be better because that makes everybody else better. I'm sorry if I disagreed with you, Super Cat. I gotta wrap it up pretty soon. 5 more minutes because I just love you guys. Here we go. This is great. Oh, Ixbibos 09. The arrogant stupidity of the intelligent and the stupid arrogance of the ignorant. Yeah, I know. I'm like in all those categories every day. I just like bing, 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 bing. I'm intelligent, then I get arrogant, and then I prove myself to be stupid, and then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I gotta learn, then I get intelligent, and arrogant, and stupid, and blah, 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 blah. In the cycle. Just, if we could just be cool with the fact that every single one of us is a work in progress. Now I'm like turning into a freaking motivational poster. Mitch Connor. Super chat. Gary Edwards, English YouTube academic. Kind of want to talk to him now. I wonder if he's above and beyond me. Wishes to naturalize the social sciences in a post-positivist manner. Whatever that means. When I was reading that sentence, I'm like, whatever that means. Like, I don't understand. There's this really wonderful guy on YouTube. His name's Liam Bright. Liambright. Follow him. He's just this great postdoc guy. I think he's in the UK. And I'm like, every 6 months, I'm like, hey dude, you want to come on my channel because you're a positivist and you know all these guys and I just want to talk to you and learn things from you and then have you teach everybody what we're talking about. But he would actually maybe understand that sentence. But I'm not him. I don't understand that. So, whatever that means. Thanks for the beer money. It's going to go right back into these disposable, non-disposable cans. Beer is sexist. You know what? So is kombucha. But at least this has hops in it. Kombucha just has raspberry puree in it. I know. I don't know how to pronounce. I know what it means. I just don't know how to pronounce it. Well, you don't think I should start drinking beer from a keg? I mean, if a keg could last, if I refrigerated it, it could last for a week or 2 weeks. How many people are watching me? 61. I think we're wrapping it up. I'm not drunk. This is my second beer in 3 hours. So I had a lot of work to do. And I think I need to get back to work. So I'm going to go cook some rice and do everything. And Jesse, we're going to leave you with this lovely little emoji without a mouth because I'm shutting down. Uh-oh. Jesse, you guys are great. Oh, wait, hold on. Ankush Narula. Someday, hopefully, I'll be able to talk to you and hear that phonetically. You say, Benjamin A. Boyce, the more I learn how little I know. That's true. That's true. The more I produce, the more I feel there is so little that I have produced. So much more that I have to produce. So I'm going to upload this video and I'll talk to you soon. Follow me on Twitter at Benjamin A. Boyce. Show up to North Lacey. Connect with me on Facebook to get the address. BYOB meetup on Saturday. I will make it up to Vancouver soon. I've been working on a big story with somebody on Twitter about somebody in Vancouver, and I'm meeting a lot of people in Vancouver, so I have even more reason to go up there and see there. I don't know if you guys can read between the lines, but there's more coming on the Travis Pangburn story. Hopefully, I kind of want to interview that guy. I kind of want to interview him. Seems kind of interesting. Albeit he's in a lot of trouble. Anyways, one last quote. We're going to leave this out. I'm going to guzzle this, and I'm going to hit that done button. Sorry about the green screen. Okay. And